what we're doing is we're isolating groups. So let's take all of marriage, and then we're going to break it into the categories of the people who are getting married. So
Okay.
so people who are getting married are going to fall under different categorizations. They could be secularists, they could be swingers, they could be polygamists, they could be atheists, they could be devout Catholics, they could be devout Orthodox. The thing is, the reason it's more useful to break it up that way is because then we can peer in and see if each of these groups has the same exact risk as each other group when it comes to marriage, and we find out that's not the case at all. And that these risks are mitigated descriptively right now if you're part of a religious organization that is much more devout. And the more religious you are, seemingly the more happiness you report and the lower your divorce rates become.
So your answer is just be more religious.
No, what I'm asking is, what is the thing that's causing that? What is the thing that's causing these groups to have such a more mitigated amount of divorce in comparison to the national average from secularists? What is it?
Andrew has a good point here. He's breaking marriage down by subgroups instead of treating all marriages with the same risk. Then he's asking the right question. Why do some groups have much lower divorce rates than others? Take mainline Protestants versus Catholics. The difference isn't random. It has a lot to do with how that denomination treats marriage. More specifically, it comes down to how seriously that group views marriage. Stricter religious cultures tend to package a few stabilizing forces together. They have things like shared norms, community accountability, social shame for betrayal, and pressure to reconcile. People in serious religious cultures also tend to screen harder before marriage. Family, church, and close friends are usually more involved. That massively changes the incentives. Divorce begins carrying a serious social cost. That's what it seems like Andrew's real point is. Marriages become far more stable when they're surrounded by structures that reinforce commitment and punish defection.
But you see how men want to have kids.
Sure.
And so they want their kids to have good outcomes. And so how are men going to have their kids have good outcomes?
Well, you can have kids and not live in a way that looks like marriage to the government.
Yeah, okay, how?
You have kids with a woman,
Mm-hmm.
you don't live together, and you parent them together in separate homes.
That looks the same as divorce. That looks the same as a divorced arrangement to me. How is that different?
And that's the unfortunate reality of the world that we live in today.
What? So your solution is here's your idea.
The only difference is the man is still the head of the household.
Hang on. Here's what you just said. If you get divorced, am I allowed to respond?
Is that the men are still the head of the household when they run the relationship that way versus
they're not the head of the household.
Women are still. Sorry?
How are they the head of the household if you're not even living together? There is no household.
You're paying for everything.
Yeah. So your solution is have two separate houses. So you're paying double for two separate houses, and then split parenting time. Split parenting time with the woman.
What's that?
Your idea here is pay for two different domiciles and then split parenting time with the woman. Now, if we had a divorced relationship, you would be living in two domiciles and splitting the parent time with the woman.
Andrew's critique here is weak. He's assuming the only serious way for kids to get good outcomes is through the nuclear household, where the mother and father live together full time. But he never argues that point. He only leans into it. Instead of first explaining what's wrong with a man and woman parenting from separate homes, he immediately frames it as basically the same thing as divorce, and then asks how it's different. He first smuggles in the critique, then asks the question. But he doesn't prove this arrangement functions the same way as divorce. That matters because a man doesn't need to physically live in the home full time in order to be the head of a household. The idea is way too sentimental and simplistic. If you look at it structurally, it's easy to see how a man could be the head of one or multiple households without regular presence. He can own the property, provide the resources, handle legal and financial oversight, make long-term decisions, and lead the broader direction of the family, while the wife handles most of the daily domestic tasks. If there's a sustainable division of labor, there's nothing incoherent about that arrangement. Andrew's basically reducing household to everyone sleeping under one roof. But that's kind of shallow. A household isn't just shared square footage. It's an organized family structure with a common objective. A family is kind of like a team. Looking at fathers historically, being physically absent for long portions of the day was never unusual. In many ordinary families, the father worked long hours, came home late, dealt with repairing something broken, like a car or refrigerator, looked over finances, took care of property issues, or even brought work home, and often had limited face time with his kids. In some homes, he was very present. In others, less so. But less face time didn't mean he was less of a father. So Andrew's argument seems to assume that if the father isn't continuously present in the home, then he has somehow ceased to occupy that role. And that doesn't follow.
But if you're with a woman and she says, hey, I love you, and you say, I love you too, sort of thing, and she says, let's have a family, I'd like to have kids, you say, fine. But here's my boundary. I can't live in a way that looks like marriage to the government. So I'm going to pay for a house. I'll rent a house. I'll look after you. I'll come and visit you and the kids. But we can't live in a way that looks like marriage to the government.
Now, Rich, what prevents the
We're
woman,
running the show.
since there's children involved, what prevents that woman from going and pursuing child support anyway and just breaking up with you?
She can, but she doesn't
Yes,
get
she
anything else.
can. This doesn't mitigate anything.
Yes, it does.
No,
you don't have
what?
to lose half your shit.
You're already paying for half of their shit. You're paying for all their shit.
No, you don't lose half of your assets, Andrew.
Yes, you do. You're
I think
already
no, you
paying
don't.
half your assets so this woman can live apart from
You're
you.
not.
Andrew's framing this question badly. It just assumes the arrangement is unstable. He's basically acting like if the man is not living in the house, then the woman is naturally more likely to take over. But he hasn't even given a reason why that household is more likely to fail. I'll answer the question directly. What stops the woman from breaking up and pursuing child support in this kind of arrangement? It's not that she can't. It's that she has strong incentives not to, because she's receiving massive advantages from the relationship. She doesn't have to plan long term. She doesn't have to manage the financial overhead. She doesn't have to hold responsibility for repairs, legal issues, provisioning, or solving larger problems. The man carries final responsibility for everything. So if her priority is raising a healthy family, this arrangement is very attractive. She benefits from support, stability, and division of labor. Andrew's framing misses the point. He's acting like non-cohabitation automatically weakens the arrangement, when in reality the question is whether the woman is better off staying inside that structure than leaving it. If she leaves, yeah, she may be able to pursue child support, but she's still giving up a tremendous amount. In Rich's model, the man is competent, responsible, sexually desirable, financially productive, and fully handling his role. That's not easy to replace. By leaving, she loses access to his skills, planning ability, labor, judgment, provision, and problem-solving capacity. Even if we unrealistically grant that she can do everything he can do just as well, she still loses the efficiency of the division of labor. She now has to carry far more of the burden herself. And that's before even getting into how difficult it would be to find another man at that level who's willing to step into a household with children. And then there's the most obvious point of all. If this is a real marriage type bond and not just a sterile contractual setup, she's risking the loss of the man she loves. So the idea that she would casually walk away just because she technically can is way too naive. So why would she not break up with you? Because the exit costs are enormous.
Let's just agree on something. Like some of the biggest risks for men are what? Child support, alimony, and the loss of half of their assets, yeah?
Yeah.
So you just eliminate two of those risks. And the only thing that you would have to deal with is child support versus marriage, where she can take half of your shit, alimony, and child support.
You hang on. You haven't done that exactly. So no, you haven't eliminated this risk. So here's why you haven't eliminated it. You're still paying out just like you were divorced. You're still paying out just as though you were divorced for this woman to be taking care of your kids for half her assets, and you're living apart from her. And what this does is this also creates a massive problem, which is that the outcomes for the children are still not going to be as good as if they were at home with mommy and daddy together, because we have all the data in the world to provide for this.
I don't understand how Andrew is missing something this basic. He's making two completely different arguments and acting like they're the same point. First, he says Rich has not eliminated the risk of alimony and asset forfeiture. Then when he tries to explain that, he jumps to a different claim entirely. You're still paying like you were divorced. But those are different claims. It seems like Andrew just doesn't understand the arrangement. The difference is choice. In a divorce, you don't decide how your assets are handled. The state does. In the arrangement Rich is describing, the man is voluntarily directing his resources toward his family. Inside an intact structure he still governs. That distinction is incredibly simple, and Andrew seems to be acting like it doesn't exist. Then, without proving the first claim, he immediately jumps to a second one, that this setup creates a massive problem for child outcomes. But again, that's an assertion. He's still presuming that mothers and fathers living in the same home is automatically the superior arrangement. And he hasn't demonstrated that in relation to the non-cohabitation model. Worse, he's making a false comparison. He's using data from split households and acting like that automatically applies to a non-cohabitating household. But most split households have breakdown, conflict, legal negotiation, blurred authority, competing homes, and a chaotic family model. The parents are often not acting as a team. There's no synergy, no hierarchy, no clear shared mission. Everything becomes clunky, adversarial, and mediated through the law. That's not the same thing as the arrangement Rich is advocating.
That in split households,
How much
the
data do you
negative
have on the model that I just described to you as a solution to
that
this,
would be
to this
that
problem?
would be your burden, not mine.
Well, it's one version. It's one version that I'm.
No. But that would be your burden. You would need to show me the proof that works better than the model of being heavily religious and in marriage for mitigation. That wouldn't be on me to prove to you. It'd be on you to prove to me.
Well, they're not going to study something like that, but I can tell you from evidence that I've seen that it works quite well.
What evidence?
People that I know that do it.
That's anecdotal. That's no place in a debate. You can appeal to
There's
anecdote.
not a lot of people that do this, Andrew. Like you realize this.
That's anecdotal.
Right.
Yeah, but here's the problem that you have here with this analogy. The first is when you appeal to an anecdote, if I were to give you a similar anecdote, oh, I know a lot of guys who do that and it doesn't work out for them. You wouldn't believe me because that doesn't tell us anything. That's one.
Rich gets hit here for appealing to anecdotal evidence, and Andrew says that has no place in a debate. But we have a problem here. Andrew isn't exactly right about this. There's nothing inherently irrational about using anecdotal evidence. An anecdote is still an observation about reality. It's still experience. It's still a piece of contact with the world. The real issue isn't that anecdotes are automatically invalid. The real issue is how much evidence they can carry. And that's where Andrew's critique should be. Not that Rich is using anecdotal evidence, but whether Rich's observations are enough to justify his claim. Because let's be clear, anecdotes are not worthless. They can show that something is possible. They suggest patterns. They give you reason to think a model is viable. What they usually can't do by themselves is prove that something is generally true or superior across the board. So, when Rich says, "I've seen this work quite well," that's not a reasoning error in itself. The question is, what are the actual mechanics? What are the variables? That's the part that matters. If Rich is talking about men who are competent, financially stable, attractive, structured, responsible, and who provide security, then there's already a plausible mechanism on the table. A lot of women would find that arrangement attractive. The man provides. The woman gets stability. The children reinforce the bond. The division of labor is intact. The man is still carrying leadership, planning, responsibility. So even if the arrangement is not traditional cohabitation, there are obvious incentives that could make it function well. It's not true that anecdotal evidence has no place in a debate. It is the case that anecdotal evidence is limited. It can support plausibility. It can support a hypothesis. It can even be pretty suggestive when the mechanism is clear. But by itself, it usually can't bear the full burden of proving a general rule.
But what I'm doing works for me, and I promise you, if I showed it to you privately, Andrew, or compared notes, you'd be very impressed.
Do you do dishes?
Do I do dishes?
Yeah.
Rarely.
I don't want to do dishes ever.
I don't cook. I rarely cook. I rarely.
Yeah, but I don't want to take out trash.
The cleaner
or do
comes over
dishes.
and does everything.
I don't want to do any
laundry.
chores. Like I don't ever want to do any chores ever. I just
I know, so
just
you and
want
I
the-
are in
I just
agreement.
want my
Only
wife to
I'm
do
not
all of that
exposed
shit.
to the risks of family law the way that I've structured things.
But I do the dishes. Am I gay?